Actually, I don't have it seen.
Oh, you don't?
There it is. I haven't seen. Just be a few minutes. Well, not even a few minutes. What is it?
Probably about 90 seconds.
90 seconds? Yeah.
You know, Sam and I are both redheads. We're a protected class, so be careful.
Okay. I just got the beard. The recessive, I read about it one time, the recessive red beard gene.
Yeah, that's me. Well, my hair was a lot more red when I was younger, but I had a lot more hair when I was younger, too.
Steve, you're outnumbered.
That's, this is a rinse anyway.
I was a strawberry blonde when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Here we go, guys. Yeah. Welcome once again to Dawn of Mantis, DAWN podcast. I'm Ivan with Joe and Sam. Joe, Sam, we got a special episode
Yes, we do.
tonight. And I always say that when we have guests. And I think the reason I say that is because these guys have listened to our podcast and they still will show up to be here live for this.
Yes.
It's such a special feeling that someone would do that after listening to us. Joe, do you got some stuff?
Yes, well, is it, Steve, the third or fourth time that you've been with us?
Third.
For the third time, Mr. Steve Coppinger, and then for the very first time, Mr. Tony Perrin is here with us. And they've got so many accolades. I had to type this down because if I tried to do this from memory, I would not get it. But Tony Perrin has been in law enforcement since 1976. He has worked as a state park officer for 32 years, was a firearms instructor at two of the agencies, and received an FBI letter of commendation for his role in the capture of a top 10 FBI fugitive. Tony has served as a historical consultant to the U.S. Marshal Service since 1983 and has served as a guest curator at the Old State House Museum for the award-winning exhibit Badges, Bandits, and Bars, Arkansas Law and Justice. For over 30 years, Tony has been a speaker of the history of crime and law enforcement to museums, civic organizations, historical societies, and law enforcement groups. He has even appeared on the History Channel in a series titled The History of the U.S. Marshals Service. I don't know if I missed anything, Tony, but that... So we feel very lucky to have Tony Perrin.
I think that's enough there to get a cup of coffee.
And then with us again is Stephen Coppinger. Steve is a retired Arkansas State Police captain with 40 years of experience in law enforcement. He was a detective for much of that time and has worked in notable cases such as Morgan Nick, Melissa Witt, and Pauline Storman. He also served at the Attorney General's office in Little Rock and provided personal security for Arkansas Governors Jim Guy Tucker and Mike Huckabee. After retiring, Stephen added yet another title to that long roster, author. His most recent book is AWOL at Crook's Cabin, The Murder of Arkansas State Trooper Sidney Pavatt. We had Steve on episode 231 to talk about that book, and anyone who hasn't listened to it, I urge you to do. Tony and Steve have nearly 90 years of law enforcement experience between them and a bottomless well of knowledge concerning Arkansas history, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have you guys in here with us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Reading all that, I also, like you said, wow.
Yeah.
How'd we get these guys?
I know. Yeah, it's amazing. Hey, Mr. Perrin, we'll start off with what we were saying before the episode, talking about the United States Marshal Museum in Fort Smith. You wanted to make a point about what it actually is and who it actually is from, not the Fort Smith like you were saying before.
That's true. A lot of people consider it just an attraction for Fort Smith, but it is an attraction for the nation. Just the same as if you went to the Smithsonian. It's a national museum, but it's operated, of course, by the city of Fort Smith for everyone in the country. And it honors all the FDS marshals and marshals that have been slain in line of duty. It's a 5,500 square foot building. It's so intense, it even has its own cafe. You know, you're going to spend that much time, you're going to get hungry. You got to stop and eat lunch.
For sure. Yeah.
But it's got a lot of interactive exhibits for kids. It's just an amazing thing. Should have a roadblock on I-40 just there at the Oklahoma line and force them off the highway on into Fort Smith, because everybody needs to see it.
Yeah, I haven't been yet, but it's been on my list to go. So now that you said that, I'll definitely. So what was the significance of that area? Was it because it's centrally located, or is it because of the Judge Isaac Parker and all of that type of history that kind of put it in that place? Is there any?
The Marshal Service originated in 1789, so it's the oldest law enforcement agency in the United States government. And in 1989, they had a big celebration. They developed an exhibit called America's Star that traveled the country, a traveling museum exhibit. It explaining the history of the Marshal Service and all the many varied things that they do and the periods that they've gone through where they might be more courtroom security oriented and now, fugitive apprehension and all kinds of activities. At the conclusion of American Star, which had a 2-year run, the plan was to build a Marshals Museum at Oklahoma City right outside the Cowboy Hall of Fame. The guy that was running it, from what I hear, disappeared with a lot of the funds. Again, it was a private effort, and so that fell through. The Marshals Museum exhibit wound up in Wyoming at the Territorial Prison Museum up there. Stayed there for several years, and it closed down. They put the stuff in storage. Marshal Service had to go to the courts to get their stuff back, but they got it. It came back to Arkansas because by that time they'd gone through a selection process. Several cities across the country bid on the site.
Okay.
Fort Smith has the unique experience of having the most, unfortunately, officers killed in the line of duty out of the Western District of Arkansas.
Oh wow. Yeah. That's I don't want to get down there so bad now because I mean I've seen the news reports about it, but I don't know why. But now that you definitely lit a fire, we should all go down there as a podcast.
Well, yeah, we could do a twofer because I've also wanted to visit the pertinent sites with the Missy Witt case.
Oh,
Like
okay.
the bowling alley and her home.
Right.
I don't know how. I don't know what the people that live in that house now think about that. I don't know if it's an annoyance or if there's several people that go by there. But anyway, I do have a lot of those sites, chosen. We could just knock it out and have a little field trip down there.
And Morgan Nick's right across the river.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right over in Almus, and we should just go spend a weekend down there.
So I've been wanting to talk to you about this case ever since the first time that I read about it on the Revolver Ground website. And talking about that just for a minute, I thought you were a Revolver guy for the longest time, but then I realized today when I was looking back through the site, it's kind of a collaboration of different authors writing on there. So I've called you that on this podcast before, so I stand corrected. Sorry.
That's
sorry
okay.
to the other individuals.
I'm just one of the guys that writes. So
yeah, that's amazing. So I want to ask Joe and Sam if they remember these guys.
I vaguely do remember that. What is that from?
The Beagle Brothers. The Beagle Brothers. Show it for the camera.
The Beagle Brothers.
Which camera?
Yeah, that camera I think will get it.
Is that good? Okay, excellent. So these guys are the guys that were always trying to get Scrooge McDuck's money from the money bin from the Disney Channel show or the Disney show. DuckTales.
Yeah,
that's where we know it because we were kids when that came out. But I found out today. I guess I didn't realize it when I first read the story that they are based on a real clan of guys, and it's from the story I was talking about earlier.
Really?
So it's from the Yellville bank robbing story.
Oh yes, that's the one I was.
So I mean, whatever you'd want to talk about on that, if you just want to start from the beginning, we'll just sit here and be kids listening to the storyteller, which I love.
Are you familiar with this, Steve? Have you heard?
I think Tony may have mentioned it to me just in passing, but the details I'm not up for. But
okay.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
anxious to hear this.
We'll get you a pillow because this will take a while.
Okay.
We've got all the time we need.
Make it a slumber party.
Mid-America was in the throes of a bank robbery epidemic. Obviously the Depression and Prohibition and several social experiments and things that happened during that time. Just about every day there was a bank robbery somewhere in the middle of America. Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, Missouri. I mean, it was ground central for bank robberies. And a vicious, violent bank robbery occurred in Colorado. 4 guys went into a bank, heavily armed, and the bank president decided to resist with firearms. And he had an old Colt single action that, according to him, was given to him by Frank James once upon a time. So it's funny how all these crime stories have tentacles that reach out through the years and are attached to each other somehow.
Yeah.
Well, he shot one of the robbers in the face and hit him in the mouth. Well, when he did, another one of the robbers shot and killed him. His son was also an employee of the bank, and he ran for the telephone, and he was shot and killed. The robbers by that time had gathered up what money they could. They took some hostages with them and fled. They let one of the hostages go right outside of town. The other two they kept with them. The sheriff was chasing them across a stream in their car. They shot and disabled his car. He had a handgun. They had long guns, so he was kind of outnumbered, so he was stuck. They made their getaway, and it was a massive manhunt all across the country for these wanton killers, because most bank robberies didn't involve violence or death. A lot of firsts came about during the search. They used commercial radio stations to broadcast descriptions or to pass on information to other officers. You know, they were listening to their AM radios. So that's kind of a first. And they also used aircraft for the first time, because during the process of this and looking for the last hostage that had not turned up, a doctor in an adjoining town was called out late at night because of an injury to a farmhand. Well, it turned out it wasn't a farmhand, it was the guy that shot in the mouth, and they had to treat him, made him treat the guy, and then they killed him and left him in an old building. The hostage was left dead in an old building, but they took the doctor in his car and pushed it off in a ravine. Well, an airplane spotted the vehicle and the body, so they were able to find that. During the course of recovering the body and the car, a Garden City, Kansas police officer took a fingerprint off the glass of the rear window of the car. And of course then fingerprint identification was in its infancy. It was, take two of them and look at them and, try to get the points of similarity for identification. And it was technician based in DC, so they could look all day and not found it at that point, but later they found out that some fingerprints taken in Stockton, California during a arrest of 3 suspicious individuals turned up the guy's name was Flegel, and that's where the beagle came from.
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
And the Dog Patch cartoon also had Evil Eye Flegel. He had the bad eye and he'd give you the evil eye.
Remember him, Joe?
Yeah.
I didn't go to Dog Patch. Joe got to go to Dog Patch.
I got a picture. I got proof. Standing by that big donkey thing or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I remember going to Dog Patch several times.
So from that point, they were able to look at the 2 fingerprints, make the 2 taken, and figure out his name. So it took a turn from there, right?
It did. That led to identifying the other members of the gang, his brother and 2 other individuals. One by one, they were each captured in various places around the country, brought back to Colorado, tried, convicted, sentenced to death, and less than a year later, they were executed. During the course of waiting between the trial and execution, Jake Flegel, who was the leader of the gang and the existing fugitive, he wrote several letters to the governor of Colorado begging for his brother's life. He had an unusual, very noticeable handwriting, and that was his undoing. They started looking for letters from him, and they apparently found one that had been postmarked on the White River line of the Briscoe Railroad, which ran from Newport, Arkansas to up in Missouri along the river. And so they flooded the area with officers from railroad detectives, city police, the county sheriff's office. It was just hundreds of officers along the river. And they finally found an outgoing letter from him to one of his old Confederates, and they wanted to rob the bank of Yellville, Arkansas. And he made a date with this guy and said, meet me at such and such day at the Branson Depot. We're going to go on the train, we're going to ride down, and we're going to rob the bank in Yellville. At the time, Branson wasn't the place it is now. It's kind of quiet, sleepy little place. But, so the officers prepared a reception for him, and several of them were on board the train when they saw him come on the train. particularly one Los Angeles police detective lieutenant, which is, you think about it in today's terms, you probably wouldn't see a Los Angeles detective down here trying to chase one of Steve's fugitives. You know, that's an unusual situation.
Yeah.
But they were on the train and they told him to surrender, and instead of surrendering, he tried to draw his weapon from the shoulder holster. The lieutenant from Los Angeles was faster, and he mortally wounded Flegel. He was taken to Springfield where he died the next day. And that pretty well closed the case of that bank robbery game.
So they alerted all the local postmasters to look for that handwriting.
Mm-hmm.
What an effort!
It is, and to think that technology, you know, back then you had to do it by mail.
Exactly.
Telephone,
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
Hold this up to the phone so I can see what that letter looks like.
That's true.
And when you say things that tie each other in, as soon as you said Newport, I thought a Phantom Marine. That's part of that. That was one of the towns associated with the Phantom Marine case we just talked about. I was wanting to ask you, Steve, as far as this bank robbing stuff, it is wild in the era that you're speaking of. It was so commonplace. In more modern times, like in your tenure, in your experience, is that something the Arkansas State Police had to deal with very much? Was
the state police would deal with bank robbery cases when those originated. Now, they didn't occur with the frequency that they did during the time period that Tony's talking about. Most of your larger metropolitan areas, though, like Bentonville, Fayetteville, Springdale, if they had a bank robbery, they didn't need state police help.
Okay.
But if you had the bank robbery at the Bank of Hinesville, we're going. And we've responded to some of the smaller communities like that. Yeah,
okay, that makes sense.
because we'd be usually the road trooper on patrol out in that county would be the first one on the scene. He'd even beat the sheriff, and getting the FBI involved would take a little while to get them mobilized and get them on the way.
Yeah.
So, state police did work some of those.
One incident that he's talking about, I got to see it up close and personal. I had a close friend that was a post sergeant for state police, and he was pulling a flying squad in Calico Rock one night. I think he had about 8 or 10 troopers up there. And they got a call that the bank at Smithville, Arkansas was being burglarized, not robbed. But John Kidwell, who's no longer with us, great guy, he said, "Let's go, guys." And I was in the car with him, and he took off at excessive speeds for the Ozarks, even from my wild driving days. I don't think I would have stood that ride all the way to Smithville. And I was thinking about crawling down the floorboard and covering my head up. Looked in the rearview mirror and couldn't see anything but lights following us. So I said, this is going to be bad. So he finally got a call and said, "It's a false alarm."
Oh, yeah.
That was up short. Yeah, and back during that era too, the state police did get involved in more safe burglaries at grocery stores, banks, automotive supply places. I remember looking through a lot of old photo archives from the 60s, 70s. There's always a bank job, or not a bank job, but a safe job somewhere that those guys are being called to work on. So CID back in that time spent a lot of time working those cases.
Well, I got a question that directly ties to, you were talking about as many bank robberies you had in all those states back in that era. Going to a super famous case, the most famous, Bonnie and Clyde. Sometimes when I think about that, their death and their funeral, sometimes I'm quite disgusted by the general public because I wrote down some facts here because I knew I would be talking about that. 10,000 people visited in downtown Dallas for like the viewing when Clyde was lying in wait to be buried, and then it said one report was up to 40,000 attended her funeral. So I don't know. I just kind of want to ask a question about like the general public, like almost being accepting of them being murderers. But I also understand there's another sense to where it's a rough time and the common people were struggling.
The folk hero angle.
Yeah, exactly. Almost like the Robin Hood-ish. So could you kind of speak to either one of you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, it was. I mean, the general population in these states that I mentioned, most of them were scraping by for a living, and the kids were starving and, people out of work. And they liked people that hit banks. The same thing with Jesse James and people robbing railroads. They're the big guys, the big corporations. They got the money. Who cares if they look? it's incidental that sometimes there were dead bodies attached to it. But yeah, it's you know how popular true crime series are here. I mean, look what we're doing today. We're talking about true crime.
Sure.
And you can't turn on the television and flip through 10 channels and not probably 6 or 7 of them are true crime stories. The public has always had, I think, Steve, I don't know if you do, but a morbid curiosity.
I was going to use that same terminology.
Great
Morbid
term.
curiosity.
Great term.
Very well said.
And they're fascinated by it.
Sure.
So that brings them out because Bonnie and Clyde were rock stars at that time. They really were. They were. Pretty Boy Floyd had 50,000 at his cemetery in a little town of Aikens, north of Sallisaw.
And most of these offenders were from little small towns in these same rural areas. So they became little local folk heroes, for lack of a better term. And but the morbid curiosity, these people originating from our area. We've seen the headlines. We've read the newspapers. There wasn't much TV coverage back then, but they've seen they've read the newspapers. And if they've been shot, killed, we know where the service is going to be. Let's just take a ride down there and pay our respects.
Yeah, I could see that. So maybe not everyone showing up there, in another sense, are not necessarily fans. They're just the morbid curiosity thing. Sam brought up during that he has a Bonnie and Clyde photo.
And the story behind that.
Yeah, I can't remember that. What was that, Sam?
Sam doesn't have a microphone, so this might.
Oh yeah.
It was found in some old family heirloom type stuff, like the old dusty box in the attic. They were going through it, and who was it, Sam?
It was my mom and
his mom and sister were found that and said, "Hey, what's this about?" And it seems like this was from people further back in your lineage, right?
I think so.
Had archived this Bonnie and Clyde stuff. So I guess you have true crime in your DNA.
Yeah. And there's some inside the other envelope. There's some stuff about Bonnie and Clyde in Oklahoma and kind of them being in the area.
Right.
So yeah.
So
pretty cool.
My dad always told me a story about his parents. I can't remember when I say my dad, I mean my granddad. He was born in 1918. So when he was younger, he always had this story. He told me about that happened when he was younger, that Pretty Boy Floyd had stopped by their house, their farm, and they fed him dinner and let him sleep in the barn. They didn't know, I don't think at the time it was Pretty Boy Floyd, until I think my dad said months later they saw his picture in a newspaper as a wanted man and thought, my God, that guy, we harbored that guy here for a night or two. So that's kind of a story from my family lore about, involving Pretty Boy Floyd.
And then the first thing they did was get on, at the next Sunday lunch or dinner or family reunion, begin to share that story about how this guy visited our home.
Yeah.
Gets them a little notoriety.
Yeah, for sure. Sam, that was great. I forgot all about that.
I did too.
Yeah, that was crazy.
They were. I mean, that would be like one of us saying, well, I saw Kevin Costner the other day.
Right.
I didn't talk to him enough. But they were celebrities.
Yeah.
And you do get into this weird thing where, like Chris Watts, the guy, the family annihilator, he murdered Shanann and the 2 young girls, and then there's several others that, one of the Boston bombers had their picture. Their picture was the cover of was it Time or one of the major magazines?
Yeah.
And it's almost like morbid curiosity almost turned into hero worship for some of these people. But like with Bonnie and Clyde, I kind of grew up as thinking the Robin Hood thing, and then I listened to this. I can't remember who it was by, but it was like a 9-hour series on them, and they really went into depth of how Bonnie and Clyde, they were just cold-blooded killers.
Yeah.
They took the lives even of law enforcement officers just for the taken, not just when they were trying to flee or being attacked. They, searched out and killed for literally no reason other than just to kill. They were psychopaths.
Yeah, the line from the Highwaymen movie on Netflix with Kevin Costner. Someone was, going on about Bonnie and Clyde and the like fanboying over them almost. And he's like, well, 2 nights ago, Bonnie shot a state trooper right in the face while he's laying on the ground.
Right.
So it's like, and the guy was like, oh, it's like, so, that definitely humanizes it
They had 11 documented victims, and 10 of them were officers.
Wow. Yeah.
10 of the 11.
Yeah.
They killed one here in Arkansas.
Okay.
Alma.
The Alma police chief. Yeah.
Oh, really? That? Well, is there a story behind that, or?
They came up here. Back up. They had a car wreck crossing the Little Red River out in Oklahoma. Ran off the bridge and wrecked. Battery came back into the car somehow and burned Bonnie's legs. So they wound up at a tourist court on right before you go onto the bridge from Fort Smith to Van Buren on 64.
Okay.
Can't remember the name of it. It was a tourist court, and back then they had cabins with a garage attached, or sometimes a garage between the two cabins, and that's where they stayed. And they were running a little low on funds, so Buck Barrel, Clyde's brother, and W.D. Jones, one of the gang members, drove to Fayetteville and robbed the Piggly Wiggly store at 111 West Lafayette.
Wow.
The Methodist Church tore it down to make a parking lot.
Yeah, the parking garage.
I haven't
there.
forgiven them yet for that stuff. History.
I went 111 West Lafayette. I want to stop by. I'm in Fayetteville all the time.
It's just a parking lot.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
send you a picture.
Okay.
Of it.
Yeah. Do it. Yeah. That's amazing.
That is, yeah, see, and I read that the last weeks, I guess it was, or maybe it was days of Bonnie's life, I remember that of her legs being injured so bad, and she was in a really bad way, and I mean, they were just beat up and desolate by the time they were finally mowed down.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So, the way a couple different movies have portrayed it is that the Texas Rangers kind of got a kind of a bead on their pattern, and they were able to figure out like when they would be.
Because they went back to visit certain family members, right? And they kind of knew that. And
Well, even in their running, they would run several states, Dallas to Missouri to Arkansas to Louisiana, just kind of a big circle.
Okay.
Sometimes they deviated, sometimes they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, he wasn't a Texas Ranger when he took the case.
Oh, okay.
Texas was involved with a bad governor, and he was voted out of office, couldn't run again, impeached, I think. But his wife ran. So
okay.
Ma Ferguson became the
yeah.
governor. And she tried to destroy the Texas Rangers by giving out commissions to thugs and criminals and getting rid of the good Texas Rangers. And so a lot of them quit. Frank Hamer, of course, the one that killed Bonnie and Clyde, did quit. He didn't want to work for her. But after they had the prison break, where they got those guys out, the one that came up here later and was involved in a shootout with the state police, when they got out, the prison system hired Hamer
Okay.
as a special investigator for the Texas prison system.
Were there some controversies on whether he really had jurisdiction to do what he did? It seems like I read about that at one point. Some people probably, of course, people are always going to say things like, but he wasn't allowed to go as far as he went.
It's kind of like the Los Angeles police detective in Branson, you know. Yes, there were representatives of local law enforcement there.
Oh, okay.
So under their authority, under their cover of authority.
Gotcha.
And the sheriff of Bienville Parish was there, and his chief deputy, Prentice Oakley, and they were there with Hamer, and Hamer had hired a former Texas Ranger named Manny Galt.
Okay.
And he was with him. That's the character portrayed by Woody Harrelson.
Will Harrelson, yeah.
And then there were two Dallas County deputy sheriffs that had been on the trail of Bonnie and Clyde since they killed those two highway patrolmen in the Dallas area.
Yeah. Did you enjoy that? Did you feel like that particular movie portrayed that as well as it could have? Or
It was much better than that comedy that Warren Beatty and his partner did.
Yes.
That was terrible.
I loved that movie when I was a kid, but when I watched it again as an adult and I knew a little bit about the history, I knew it was butchered by that point.
The music track was great. I like the Foggy Mountain Breakdown, all of
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
banjo tunes. But no, the new movie was actually pretty close.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I wish we could walk into a gun store like he did, and I'll say, I have one of those, one of those.
Oh, that's
Some
true.
of them,
That's true. That's true. That's true. Yeah. So,
Well, something. Have you got something right now?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, something prompted a question in my mind for Steve about during your time with the Arkansas State Police. Did you ever have any jurisdictional entanglements? You know, there's a few cases I've read where something might be just across the line, and there would be different, different jurisdictions kind of vying over jurisdiction or authority there. Did you ever run into any of that?
I mean, I worked a few cases across the line into Missouri, and I worked a few in Oklahoma. We never really got into turf wars. Generally, those types of wars are going to be from your command staff up when you start getting higher in rank. Okay. But the boots on the ground kind of guys, we all got along real well. We knew who the people we needed to call over there to talk to. Hey, we've got a search warrant. We need to execute it at this place. Will you come over and help us do that?
Yeah.
And one of those times, I ended up having to write a search warrant affidavit and get it issued out of Tulsa County over there. So that was a little different, working in their rules of criminal procedure and pulling that off. But the guys, again, boots on the ground, we work very well together.
Okay, like you. So that's mainly upper management type stuff.
Yeah. You're in my backyard. What are you doing over here?
And this might be a similar question, but you see it in a Hollywood movie. There'll be some local police working a case, but then the FBI comes in and the local police will like throw a clipboard and be really mad that they're there. But I don't foresee that being a true way that a professional would behave, I don't. You just seem to see that all the time in movies. Like,
you do see that a lot on television shows and the movies, and those types of turf wars can occur. It just depends on how well the federal agency approached the city agency or the county. And,
I got you.
And said, hey, can you help us with this?
Sure,
as opposed to this is going on in your town and we're taking it over and you stay out of the way.
Oh, I got you, yeah.
So it's the whole approach will dictate
for sure.
what kind of problem you're going to have.
I'm reminded of the Texarkana case because Max Tackett with the Texarkana police, or maybe he was the county.
He was state police at that time.
State police. Despised the Texas Rangers and notably Lone Wolf Gonzalez.
Yeah, and he was not happy with having the FBI there.
No,
not at all.
Yeah, so when you said that reminded me of Max Tackett for some reason.
Yeah, Lone Wolf. We had some fun at Lone Wolf's expense. I will somewhat apologize because we kind of laid it on thick there for a few episodes, and that was mainly me. But I just thought it was. It just seemed humorous, and enough times went by, and I don't think he's listening. Well, he could be, I guess, in a sense.
No, I don't think so.
He had a touch of prima donna about him.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, if you were familiar with that.
Well, there's a certain amount of showmanship in all the Texas Rangers. I mean, it's their persona.
Okay.
You know, the hats, the boots, the ivory or sterling silver
gotcha.
grips, engraved guns. Gonzalez at one time had a machine gun mounted through the windshield of his car. Wow. He's chasing somebody, just reaches over and pulls the trigger,
that's like some Cobra stuff, right? So Sylvester Stallone, right?
Yeah, it was.
That's amazing. I mean, I got more respect for the guy now a little bit. I mean, he's got a machine gun and a shotgun.
When you look at his actual investigative effort on that case in Texarkana, Texas, he didn't do much other than just cater to the news media and try to build up, as Tony said, the persona of the Texas Rangers and not taking away their history, but that doesn't solve your cases when you're just kind of
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, could that have helped to some degree? I mean, I know it didn't help, but do you think that some of that it makes the assailants like nervous, scared, like, oh, now the Texas Rangers are after me, and maybe they make a mistake? Was that part of the swag that they carried? Did they want to make that happen?
Intimidation or something?
Yeah, like an intimidation. Like, now you got the big dogs after you.
I don't personally think that was probably Gonzalez's motivation was to try to spook, whoever the offenders were. I think it was just to build up again the mystique, the aura of the Texas Ranger organization itself.
I got you. I got
You
you.
guys have to put on your list after you go to the Marshals Museum to visit the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame in Waco, Texas.
Okay.
Very great
I'd love
museum
to go to Waco anyway.
see.
It
Yeah,
is
I just drove through there, so
yeah,
Yeah.
It's in Waco.
The guns that Bonnie and Clyde had. The
Wow.
guns that Hamer used during the.
Oh, I'd love to go see. Yeah.
I was fortunate. I had a good friendship with the guy that was curator for years. His Gaines de Graffenried, old German name, but his family's long-term Texas people, and he had been a curator there for a long time, and he was after stuff that belonged to an exhibition shooter in Jonesboro, Arkansas, many years ago. And when he found out I was from Arkansas, he was always wanting me to go here and go there, try to find him some of that stuff. But if I went there and I had time, he'd say, "Tony, you want me to open the case?" And if I wanted to see the BAR that Hamer used that day, he'd open the case and hand it to me.
oh my gosh.
He said, "You
Wow.
want to see the gun that Garrett used to kill Billy Kid?" Sure. And he'd open the
my
case and hand it to me, you know. And I'm thinking, this is like a kid in a candy store, you know.
That's
I was
yeah.
Judging how far it was to the car, did I think I could outrun all the Texas Rangers in Texas? But it was an amazing experience behind the scenes.
Oh, I bet it
to
was.
get to actually look at that stuff close, but it's a fantastic museum.
Yeah.
You should go there.
Yeah, for sure.
I had that feeling momentarily when I thought I was looking at the rifle that got Sydney, but
Yeah.
the hairs on my neck were standing up. Oh
I think
my gosh.
everyone's head in that room, you know.
Oh, you felt the room change.
Yeah.
Because the lady that was beside me, you said her name was Janice?
Janice Duffy.
She leaned over and she said, "That's the rifle." You know.
Yeah.
Oh, it was like an electricity in the air.
But we said of the era, more than likely, probably. I mean,
That was
and
probably
it could
stolen
have
by
been.
Spiegel.
Again, but I was interested in looking at the serial number as well, and when I could get away and finish the presentation and see it close enough, and I noticed the discrepancy in the number, I thought, well, dang it,
Yeah.
we'll never convince the owner, Mr. Owens, it's not the rifle that was used to shoot, Sydney.
Yeah.
But we cannot discount the likelihood that it is one of the many rifles that Spiegel stole while he was on his crime spree up in Yellville. So
In Steve's defense, I did send the serial number out of the book to the president of the club, and when she said that she had found it, I said, "Check the serial number." Well,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I guess it didn't get checked.
Oh well.
I still
It
think
was
the
still
whole
a great conversation piece
yeah
for the
the whole
group.
experience was
Enhanced.
awesome. Yeah. Just because of even though it wasn't that it made the whole thing just even that much better. I
Yeah.
thought.
Because as sad as that event was in September of 1948, you could tell and gauge by the public reaction and response in attending, it's still very much part of their makeup in that little community. It's still part of their history. Not that they're proud of it, but they are.
Yeah,
Proud
for
of
sure. Yeah. Proud of that officer for sure.
Yeah.
This is touching on a conversation that we had on the phone the other day. You are, maybe not native, but you have lived in Pocahontas?
My family moved to Randolph County in 1844,
Wow. Okay.
and
Tony was just a kid then.
yeah, I was still in diapers.
Oh, that was good. That was so quick.
Okay, one for Steve.
We'll have Sam put a little point total under you.
Yes, let's keep going.
He will. He'll go, yep, to one. Well, I can't remember if I brought this up, but I just the other day discovered the story of Linda Collins Smith, former senator for Arkansas.
She
and,
started out as a rep and later became senator.
Okay, so you are familiar. I don't know. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that case. It's such a bizarre case, and I think I've mentioned it on here before, but she was, for those that haven't heard the story, she was a former state senator, and I guess after that was over, she returned to Pocahontas, where she was from, and she was married to a judge. And were they in the midst of a divorce at the time?
They were, unfortunately. They're both nice people.
Yes.
We knew them well.
Okay.
And they're both nice people, and I hate that they split up, but that happens sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Phil, when he was named as a suspect, it was devastating to me because he was a few years ahead of me in grade school at Imboden, Arkansas. And even though I didn't go to church at the Baptist church, I'd go to the Royal Ambassadors meetings at the Baptist church because it's fun, get to hang out with other kids. And And if I ever got picked on, Phil would protect me. He was he looked out for me, and I've always appreciated that. And I didn't even know it till just recently, but he had also been a member of the same fraternity I was in ASU.
Oh, cool. Wow.
And so I really appreciate Phil for a lot of things.
Yeah.
I knew he couldn't hurt her.
Right, and of course he didn't. As the story goes, obviously she was found murdered.
And again, was that where did she lead investigators to think it was him? Did she do something to
No.
that?
No, they always go to the spouse, and especially if they're in the midst of a divorce
okay.
or a separation, boy, they really go to the spouse. But yeah, it was this assistant that she'd had.
Yeah, that's who it's
forever. Yeah, and this assistant had the way she was caught was so crazy because it was all those security cameras, and this assistant was the one who had put them up, and she was also the one who took them down before. But I guess what she didn't realize is that they still
Kept recording.
They kept recording, and
Yeah.
so this camera's laying in the bottom of this bag, and films her leaning over it with the bloody knife, covered in blood, cleaning it off. Couldn't be more
Yeah, exactly.
incriminating.
Yeah.
Couldn't be. And I love the YouTube video I saw. This assistant had really played the part of the grieving friend, tears, waterworks, and I mean, I was fooled because they showed a couple of previous interviews. So they bring her in, and she's, "Have you found out anything new?" We have. Oh, that's great. Yeah, and he said, "Look at that screen right there." And then they played that video, and then he said, "We got your ass."
Yeah.
And her face, that's when you saw the look of someone that just realized, "Oh, I'm going to jail."
That's
forever."
when she quit acting. At that point.
She was on her way to the funeral when the sheriff stopped her.
Oh, that's what. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Kevin Bell, the sheriff over there, he's a former state trooper. Great guy. Yeah, he's done some good things over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're incredibly familiar with this case. You knew the people. I mean, Pocahontas is small, so I guess if you're from there, you will know everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sad to lose, Linda.
Yeah. Ivan,
Let's see what else I have in my notes. Sorry.
if you don't, I've got something here.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just curious. This is one of the ones I was handed a file by Tony before we started. And this was, I got to breeze through this just a little bit, but this stuck out to me. The day America's love affair with criminals ended. Can you elaborate on this a little bit?
Perfect segue from what we were talking about a while ago.
Oh,
with
great.
everybody
Excellent.
Being so enamored with celebrity criminals.
Sure.
It took something, and the parallels, guys, are right now. And I think Steve would agree with me on this, but our crime is skyrocketing almost on a level or beyond what it was in the 20s and 30s.
Wow.
And if we don't get it under control soon, it's going to damage this country to the point it may not recover. So it's a real critical time. And a lot of people are fed up with it. And this event was something that kind of polarized people to not like criminals near as much. You hear about the St. Valentine's Day massacre, 7 gangsters killed by other gangsters. But this one is an assault on law and order. And they killed, an FBI agent, 2 Kansas City police detectives, and the chief of police in McAlester, Oklahoma. And that shocked folks. It really did. And that enabled Hoover to get several laws pushed through Congress that strengthened the FBI at the time. So it was a pivotal event.
And it's strange. So is it just the lackadaisical laws, I guess, we have towards criminals? I mean, hasn't that been relaxed recently? I mean, there's videos all the time of people just walking into stores and filling up the bags, and everyone's just standing around doing nothing. They're just letting them walk out with all this merchandise and stuff.
It's my opinion that if the woke movement continues the way it is and we don't wake up, we're in trouble.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I don't know if you read the billboard on the back of my shirt. It says, "Without the certainty of punishment, there is no deterrent to crime."
Right.
And that quote came from a Fort Smith newspaper in 1875. The first time Judge Isaac Parker marched 6 people up on the gallows at one time that all been separately convicted of capital crimes and sentenced to death, and hung them all at the same time.
Wow.
All across the nation, newspapers exploded, calling him the hanging judge and a barbarian and a butcher and all kinds of vile names Fort Smith newspaper, give them credit. They stuck up for him and said, "This is this." And he said one of his favorite quotes was, "I don't hang anybody. The law does."
Yeah,
That's good. That's a good
That's
quote.
amazing.
If we don't come back to law and order,
Yeah.
and it's always been evil on one side and law and order on the other, and they bash against each other all the time.
Yeah.
And it's critical that this stops.
I just know when some debates happen about something 3 strikes and you're out, you've got people that are so against that. And I want to say why. I mean, it's a common sense way of thinking about it. I mean, you could debate on how many strikes, I don't know, but it just seems to me commonsensical that if you can't behave and you're habitual, like it's time to do something about it.
It is.
For a
Especially,
long period
3
of time.
times, I think even that, like, wow, you had 3 times, buddy. You know, like we said this before, we're in our mid 40s. We had 0 times.
Exactly.
And it hasn't
Yeah.
been that hard
Yeah.
to not do it, you know.
It's just like, one time I got a speeding ticket in Westville, Oklahoma, heading to college over at NSU. Paid it, but they didn't have a good way of doing receipts, so they put down that I didn't pay it, or they didn't keep my receipt. It was a real disorganization thing. So I had a friend that called me and said, "Hey, you have a warrant over there for that ticket." And I was like, I was completely stressed. It was like a little bit after 5. I called, they didn't answer. Oh no. Went over there, found one of their cops, and I'm like, "Hey, I got a ticket over here and a warrant. Don't arrest me or whatever." I probably shouldn't have done that. But it's like I don't know. I just feel like that's how you should be as a rational human. Like I want to be a productive member of society that's not harming others and acting crazy. And if I can be that way, so cautious, you could have people that could live in somewhere in the middle and not cause any major things. And the 3 strikes you're out is a great way to me. In anything like that, you guys could probably speak to a lot more policies that have been thrown to the wayside that makes sense.
Well, and I have a pretty hard ass attitude towards, this is to keep a functioning society. It's like we get to be here. No one's entitled to anything. You get to participate in this functioning society, and to keep it that way, you got to follow some rules. And I don't want to sound like, as soon as you say that, some people automatically accuse you of being, Nazi or whatever. But no, there has to be a rule of law.
That's right.
And I mean, like I said, I have some if there's absolute, undeniable proof that you have harmed a child in a certain manner,
Totally.
I'm like, castration. I mean, I go way, a lot of people would call that, but yeah, that's just how I feel. There's no excuse for that whatsoever. And, I'll just say this. I'm not advocating for it, but there's certain countries where if you steal something, you get your hand cut off. Crime is pretty low in those countries because there is a sudden and abrupt punishment.
Yeah.
But I'm not advocating for that.
But you're just saying, like, whenever you have a rule of law, it does deter. That's basically what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and it's through the veil of the woke movement, like he said, where nothing is anything and everything upside down, and there's no right and wrong, and everything is just wacky. Punishment is
until you say the wrong word.
Exactly.
Then that's wrong.
And I totally agree. If the woke thing continues, I've heard, I can't remember who it was, but someone said, if it reaches our military and penetrates that, we're done. Well, it has. Yes. It absolutely has. And I don't know, man. It's a little worrisome.
Yeah.
Steve's perspective on a lot of what both of you said, and I agree wholeheartedly with you, is that we've got so many people, though, that are looking for an excuse for bad behavior. Well, it was because he came from a broken home.
Sure.
Or it was because he his father was absent from the home. It was because of this. It's because of mental illness. So we really shouldn't punish these people for their 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th time offenses because of all of these excuses. It's people, I think, trying to displace responsibility on something else.
I gotcha.
You got to hold people responsible for the good.
Yeah.
Give them accolades for the good, but you've also got to hold them responsible for the things they do that are wrong. And,
Sure.
And there are offenders that offend very early at age. I've known young men that have been involved in a homicide at the age of 18. They've done their time. Most of those folks don't reoffend in that category. Now, there are other crimes where there are continual recidivism issues going on. You talking about the Middle Eastern countries cutting off the hand? It certainly cuts down on recidivism when you don't have the hands to pick something up to carry it off with. But yeah, we're really looking for excuses to blame my poor behavior on somebody or something else so that I don't have to face the punishment for it.
Yep.
And then we also try to use the excuse, well, you know, if we locked everybody up for 3 strikes, you're out, we'd have to build so many more prisons, and it's going to cost so much more extra tax dollars, and we really need that to fill in the blank. You know, what's some public program that we need to,
illegal aliens.
Yeah.
One of the silly questions or silly comments, my son and I were talking about this at lunch today. The quarterback from Houston he's complaining about the fact that his father, who's in the penitentiary for kidnapping and rape and some other offenses, 38-year sentence, has not been able to get out to see him play.
It's on TV, isn't it?
Yeah. If he's in the penitentiary, there's a television in there. You could watch it there.
Shouldn't be.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say. That it's such a silly. I mean, what do they want? I mean, you want a furlough so you can a weekend furlough so you can hurt somebody else.
It's the system keeping him down.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this, and there should be, like, you know, if something like that happens, it's like, look, we know maybe you came from a broken home, maybe your dad wasn't around, maybe this, maybe that, but the end of the day, you robbed and shot someone, let's say.
You knew that wasn't your house you were walking into
right.
to
For
take
that
everything
offense,
from.
I don't care who you are, where you're from, what you look like, or what you've done. If you commit that offense, this is your punishment. You know, there's no excuse.
It's just probably just a larger case, just a lack of empathy, not like a family. You wouldn't think you would ever hear that, because if it happened to their family, they would be on the other side of that issue totally. They would never want that person to see the light of day again.
And if everybody just had even the most basic respect and self-respect, I've always said that it all comes down to self-respect, and respect your community. And, you know, if you're walking out of Hardee's and you see some napkins blown across the sidewalk that someone just tossed away, pick them up. It's your community.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I just say that because I did that yesterday. But, you know, I don't want trash around my town. You know, it's like, do something, step up. Like, if everybody did that, you know.
Yeah.
Not to put Ivan on the spot, but you're an educator. How long have you been teaching?
About 12 years.
So you've probably been able to see a degradation in student conduct in the public school system where you are in that 12-year period. And you know that's happening because that same behavior is being played out in the home by the parents of these students, and it just seems like year after year after year it gets worse. It gets a little bit worse.
I'll comment
Not
by
to
saying,
put you in trouble with the district.
I'll comment by saying no comment, and sometimes that's a pretty good comment. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but I totally get what you're saying. I mean, yeah, I can't speak too much of it, but
I understand.
But
I understand.
definitely, great point.
Yeah.
You know, right now, police officers are in great danger from just simple traffic stops for non-compliance. And I'll go on record, and you can bleep it if you want to, but Mr. Floyd wasn't murdered. He died of drug poisoning.
Really?
And every person that you see in America that saw that on the television, they believe they witnessed a murder. It's not true. The autopsy report showed no bruising, no damage to his neck, nothing that would attribute to death by strangulation. And everybody in the country would read Romans too. It'd pretty well figure things out and just comply and go through the courts and do what things are allowed by Lord's appointed governments and courts. And that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, we made an agreement to, sacrifice in a sense. That's not a great word for it, but to give our ability to protect ourselves to others, to protect and serve us, not to take the law in their own hands and be Batman by night and things like that, vigilante justice. So I mean, So the one thing I look at it like this all the time. I say, you look at policing as a super large thing and not all these individual cases. I mean, I feel very safe when I'm pulled over by someone, and because I think most of them, a very high percentage are great people just trying to protect and serve, as they would say.
Well, the police officers come from the public.
Sure.
They're human. They're
That's right.
subject to
That's
making
right.
mistakes. But the public also has a responsibility to police its own community as well. It's not an either or. It's those two groups
That's
working in tandem to make it work the way it's supposed to. So when you have human officers working, is there room for police reform? Well, sure there is. But you can't argue publicly it's always the cops that are screwing up. Yeah, law enforcement needs some reform here and there, but there's got to be some parental reform in the way you're raising your kids, too.
Sure, yeah.
To teach respect, be polite to the teachers in the classroom, be polite to the people that you meet. It's not a take-all, regardless of what happens, you'll always be in the right. That you're setting your kids up for failure when you do that.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
police reform, good
Yes.
thing. But
yes.
our humanness in the homes, we've got to be better at raising our kids.
Yeah.
Well, we have a 6-year-old son, and around our house, he is crazy. I'll just tell you guys. He's not a bad guy, but he wants to do things his way, and he wants to make messes, and he'll break things, and he's not mean-hearted or anything. But I ask his teachers how he is in class because he's in kindergarten, and they say he's amazing. And I don't believe them. So I constantly ask them the same questions. Is he doing okay? He's doing fine. Are you sure? Because I know him. I know him better
Did
than
he
you.
bribe you to tell me that?
Exactly, yeah. So that's what we need. We need parents that are asking the teachers, and they really want an honest answer, not some kind of. I don't want a sugar-coated thing that he's the most amazing kid ever. I want to know, like, last week he flipped his chair over. He got mad at me. I need to know that. So, like, if more parents would want and need to know that, I think that would, to speak to what you're talking about, that would help us immensely. Instead of, it's the teacher's fault first. And
Exactly.
Then, that's a travesty.
Yeah. That reminds me of like when your teenage kid goes and spends the night at someone else's house, and then you talk to that person later. How was so-and-so? Oh, she was so
Angel.
great.
Yeah,
Just an
yeah.
angel. She even helped do the dishes and this and that. And I was like, what? Who?
Yeah,
What?
exactly,
Was that my
yeah.
kid?
Very
Exactly.
polite, said yes, ma'am, no, ma'am.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which I'm very proud.
You
but
sure
I'm
it was
like,
my kid that spent the night over there?
May go back to that certainty of punishment. Case in point, I didn't witness it, thank goodness, but one of the schools in Batesville bordered a cattle pasture and had an electric fence between the playground and the cattle pasture. And some boys tried to talk another one into urinating on the
Oh,
fence.
no.
He did, and I'd be willing to bet you that young man grew up and never once got anywhere close to urinating on an electric fence again. Period.
But he didn't have to be sent to the office because
Self-correcting.
Yeah, self-correcting behavior.
Goodness
It's amazing.
gracious.
I had a friend that did that. He said it's doing nothing. Oh, yeah. I'd never forget it. Yeah, because it's pulsing if you grew up around a farm. It doesn't hit all the time, for sure. Hey, I want to go way back to the very beginning of this episode. We didn't ask Mr. Perrin a question that in your intro, you said something about a crime that he helped solve.
Yes. We had meant to ask you about when you got the accolades for helping
Was the FBI?
The FBI catch a top 10 fugitive. What is the story behind that?
nothing heroic. I just sitting beside the road and using my memory and my eyes, and it helped. The case involved a bank robbery again. Multiple bank robberies. One of them in Mountain View, Arkansas, was a home invasion robbery. Took the banker and his family hostage, the three thugs that night. And they made the banker go down to the bank and open it up. And he tried to tell them that the vault was on a time lock and he couldn't open it. They didn't believe him, so they left some with his family, and they went down there and it didn't work, couldn't get it open. So they took all the silver, the quarters and the silver dollars back then, $50 and all that stuff.
How much would that have been?
Probably a pretty good amount, because you had merchants, needing change for their tills and things. Probably several $100s in coins and silver. I mean, enough that it had been a pain to carry that much.
Sure. Oh yeah.
But they tied the family up and left, and one of the family members was able to get away or get loose and call the sheriff's office, and the broadcast went out, and a brave trooper saw him come through Leslie, Arkansas, and I think he found them when they got to Marshall, I think, but they'd come across Highway 66 there, and he performed a traffic stop, and they got out, and eventually the sheriff of the county got down there to help him. But he was shot and wounded by this guy, and the sheriff and he returned fire, and they split, hit the woods. One of them surrendered, and found them all in a few days, I think. Went to prison. He had a long life of crime, bank robberies in different states, drug dealing in different states. Supposedly he shot a police helicopter out of the air in Utah. He did kill his partner and the partner's girlfriend after a bank robbery. I believe it was in Kansas City. At the time he was here in Northwest Arkansas, he had reached top 10 most wanted status, which has been in effect since the mid-30s. And it's been an effective program because it really highlights the guys and gals that make it to that celebrity status. They had information that he was living in Northwest Arkansas. They had information of what his vehicles were and what the license plate numbers were. He had one of the vehicles worked on at Bobby Hopper Ford in Springdale. So they had a lot of good information. They just didn't know where he was. Came to a briefing at the Springdale PD. The FBI agent was a local agent who we all trusted and cared about, Dick O'Connell. Yeah, he's great. He's one of the really good FBI agents. He also served as U.S. Marshal for the Western District and was very instrumental in helping to get the Marshall's Museum here. He's retired and living in Fayetteville. Should get him in here sometime.
Super nice
love
guy.
to.
Super nice
Wow.
guy.
Love to have him in here.
He told us, said, okay, FBI has several SWAT teams in the area, and said, he's so dangerous. He has grenades. He has fully automatic weapons. He has all blah, 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 blah. He sounded like, a rolling tank by himself. But he said, don't. And this leads back to what Steve was saying. Sometimes there's a little rub. They forget that this badge here is just as heavy as that one they've got in their pocket, and it's got just as much responsibility as theirs does. And there's some pretty professional guys. Look here, this guy, I'd stack him up against any FBI agent in the country. And they say, now, y'all don't need to try to capture him if you see him. You need to switch your radio to the scrambler frequency. It's a button you push, and the scanner land hears they don't hear the words. And use the code word knuckleball.
Knuckleball. Okay.
And when you do that, FBI SWAT teams will come out of the woodwork and save the day. Well, I was out here on 68 West, 68 West is 412 now, sitting in one of the churches there on the west side of Springdale, and I was reading the paper. Radar was on, but I wasn't really interested in writing a ticket. But I just happened to glance up as a truck went by, and one of the vehicles was a red Ford Ranchero, Henry Frank William 484. I'll never forget that tag number.
Wow.
And I threw that paper up in the air and eased out into traffic. It was getting off school time, so there's a lot of traffic. One of my best friends, Jerry Digman's a friend of Steve's too. He's no longer with us. But he had done something the chief didn't like, and he had him on school crossing duty. And he was on 68 to stop traffic and let the little kids go across the street. And
Punishment.
but in the meantime, I'm several cars behind this guy, and I get my shotgun out, and I'm getting pretty scared, just to tell you the truth. I can see a hand grenade coming back over the cars at me.
Yeah.
And we get up even with Jerry, and I lean out the window and say, "Knuckleball." And he just smiles and waves at me. I'm thinking, help me. But in the meantime, I had called into the radio and said knuckleball. And my lieutenant was there, Mike Blocker. He's another one you need to get up here. Mike has served as chief of police Springdale. He was the head of CID for Springdale PD. He was a Fort Smith policeman like Steve originally. He's been around the block, one of the great investigators, I think. State police needed him, but he stayed here to raise his kids. And he said, "Hang with him, Tony. We've got some help coming." And we got to the intersection of 71 and 68. He pulled into a gas station. There's two people in the car, a man and a woman. And when we got there, by that time, I was right behind him, and I saw him looking in the rearview mirror constantly. And I said, "This is going to end bad. I know this is going to end bad." And he pulled in, and I could see lights and other cars all around, you know. And Mike Blocker said, "Let's take him, Tony." So we all swarmed in there, you know. And I got the guy out, put him on the ground, and I thank you, Lord, for not letting me kill that guy. I was so scared that I had the guy on the ground, on concrete, face turned sideways, and I had the 12 gauge in his ear.
Oh my God.
And I was leaning on it. And if he had farted, he'd have been dead. And by this time, they got the girl out, and girlfriend, and he was sitting on a Colt 45 when he got out of the car. So he was heavily armed. We load him up. Another officer rode with me and watched him while I was driving. Got him to the station, and I've never seen that many suits in my life. The FBI came out of the woodwork. They just grabbed him and ran into an interview room. And I'm thinking, okay, this might be something good I've done. And Dick came out a little bit later, and he put his arm on my shoulder, and I knew it wasn't going to be good when he put his arm on my shoulder. He said, "Tony, it's not him." So he had, by this time, got the guy to admit who he was and date of birth, and we ran him. He's wanted for everything from homicide all the way down to the end of the list, and rape, burglary, robbery, everything. Jeez. But he had a room key to a cabin at Devil's Den in his pocket. And so they were going to go to Devil's Den. And I was moping because my chance to do something good had gone out the window. But Dick came up and said, "Tony, you want to go to the SWAT team?" I said, "Yes." And it was a great honor for them to let me go with them. And just so happened that I knew the ranger down there because he and I went to the police academy together. And I knocked on his door. I said, "Paul, where's cabin so-and-so?" And he said, looked behind me. He said, "These guys in spacesuits out there, you know, with machine guns." And he said, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, I can't tell you, but where's that cabin?" He said, "Over there." And he gave us the directions, and they went over there and kicked the door. He wasn't in there, but there were 83 guns in that building.
Wow.
Whoa. And Dick said, "Well, I guess you better go on back to Springdale." I said, "Okay." So he called me in the morning and said, "We found out where he was. We're staked out on his place in Fort Smith." And he was in one of those trailer courts out on Towson, out on Towson Road.
Probably the old Pino Motel or something right there nearby.
I can't think of the name of it, Steve.
There were several out there.
Yeah, way out there,
Yeah.
almost to the bypass. But they had guys in a brick house across the driveway, and the chief of police of Fort Smith, who was an ex-agent, I think.
Henry Oliver.
Yeah, Henry Oliver.
Okay.
And he was with one of the agents, and they blocked the driveway when the guy started out. The guy jumped out of his van, pulled a Browning 9mm, and started firing.
Oh my God.
There were SWAT guys in that house, and there were SWAT guys behind him. And one of them jumped out of the car and came up on him with a shotgun, and he hit him in the groin area, knocked his leg out from under him. And so he dropped the pistol, and he kept telling him when he hit the ground, "Why didn't you kill me?" He went to prison, first to the prison hospital at Springfield, and recuperated, and then did his time and got back out again. It's a revolving door.
Mm-hmm.
Got into heavy narcotics trafficking and arrested, and just kept on and on and on until I finally asked Dick, I said, is he still alive? And he said, I think he's dead, Tony. I think he died. And I found his grave in Taney County. He was from up that way, and it kind of bothered me a little bit knowing that he might still be alive, and didn't know if he was vindictive or not, but I visited his grave and put a close on it, I thought. But then I saw a news article from up here. Benton County was trying to solve 3 cold case unidentified homicides, and one of them was a female, and they turned out that it was a woman, and it said that she was the girlfriend of a notorious felon, and didn't have his name right, but I called him. I said, yep, that's George Alvin Bruton, and he's in so-and-so cemetery up here in Taney County.
Wow.
But he'd killed her too.
So he was just a lifelong outlaw, murderer, you name it.
He was bad to the bone from birth, probably.
Right.
I mean, this one was one of those like Bonnie and Clyde, that a waste of oxygen.
Yeah.
And see, that's what my daughter and I were just talking about that. It's so strange. And I don't know what y'all are, we touched on this earlier. I don't know what your opinions are on it, but it seems like some people, like you said, are just a certain way right out of the gate. You can look at families that have several children, and everyone can probably think of an example in your head where maybe 3 of the kids out of the 4 are great, but there's that one. I can think of an instance in my own family. There's that one. It's like, what the hell happened to that guy, you know? And it's just, it's so strange because it's that whole nature versus nurture. We did a whole episode on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I do, obviously, the way you're raised and your environment plays a big part. But man, I think we are also wired some people just seem to be wired a certain way
They do.
that they don't fit into society at all, like that guy.
Red Hall.
Red Hall's a perfect
example.
example. We did 3 episodes on that guy down in Little Rock.
And if you listen to that one, we're talking about like dark humor. Mm-hmm. There's a particular part of that episode to where Joey's doing an impression of Red,
An overly Arkansas accent.
Okay.
describing taking law enforcement to the murder site and describing the whole scenario. And we put some funny music behind
Yeah,
it.
just kind of some hillbilly music. So as he's describing horrible mutilations, and I put her skull over here, it's ding doodle ding. You know, it's.
But again, because
Hopefully
of
it turned out well.
well, again, because of this climate and what we talked about earlier, I had to do a disclaimer. Listen, we're not making fun of the victim. It's stupid that I even have to say that. We're making fun of this murderer. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that kind of shows something's wrong when you have to. I mean, I don't know if I had to, but I feel like maybe I had
You
to.
probably did have to.
Yeah.
Use that
Nowadays.
coping mechanism because it's true.
It really is. It really is. Yeah, and because it was a dark episode for
What's
sure.
the quote you always say? We laugh at the thing. Who said
Oh
that?
yeah. We laugh at the wrong thing because we know what the right thing is. You know, so I mean, I think you could laugh at just about anything as you know, if you have the right intentions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So okay, I've wanted to ask you out of everything. That's a lot, but out of everything, what is or is there even a particular instance, a historical instance in Arkansas that really stands out to you as you know, if you could tell one of them, it would be this one, or even just one of your favorite ones.
The one with the most significance is the one you just mentioned that you know originated in Hot Springs.
Okay.
And that went from there. This gangster was hanging out there. Hot Springs at the time was considered one of the safe cities in America for gangsters. It was corrupt, the whole city, the police department, Mayor Leo McLaughlin. There was a gentleman down in Hot Springs, and he's passed away recently. He was a great credit to crime, and you guys should try to get some copies of his book, Dangerous Visitors to the Spa.
Okay.
The gunfights in Hot Springs.
Okay.
Just all these really strange things. I'm working on one that'll be the next story if I can get it finished.
Okay.
Is the day that the police department and the sheriff's office had a gun battle.
Okay.
Have you heard that story, Steve?
I think I have. I think
It's
I have.
so bizarre.
Oh, I can't wait.
It's one of those.
Will it be on the Revolver Guy site? Yeah, revolverguy.com.
Yes.
Yeah, so amazing.
There's another one that'll be out soon called "The Day That Communities Fought Back," and it talks a little bit. Joe was talking about a while ago. You know, the rampant crime and everybody just standing there watching them. Employees firing employees for trying to save their merchandise. I don't get that. You know?
Wow. Yeah,
But
that
this
is
is back in the old days.
Sure.
They objected with gunfire.
okay.
When you mentioned Hot Springs, I like that. I like how I put that.
Yeah.
When you mentioned Hot Springs, I immediately thought of, we just covered a case of Linda Edwards, a Garland County Sheriff's dispatcher, I think, that it's supposedly unsolved, but I think I know who did it.
And I remember listening to that podcast that you did, and you were sharing that the sheriff's office went to Hot Springs to the police department, and said, "Hey, this is our main suspect. We need to do some interviews." And they're like, "Well, no, we're not going to let you interview him yet."
Right.
The police department didn't have the authority to deny that interview.
Oh yeah, there's how could
As a matter of fact, they had a responsibility to put him on administrative leave and conduct an internal investigation into whether he had anything to do with it or not. Of
course, yeah.
While Hot Springs had the ability to do that internal investigation, the suspect didn't have the right under his employment law to plead the fifth. Whatever question his employers asked, he had to answer truthfully or he could be terminated.
Wow.
They couldn't share that information with Garland County because he's a suspect in the murder. But
Sure.
So there were several avenues with which that whole investigation could have played out vastly different than it did. And it was just clear from listening to Joe's retelling of that was just obfuscation.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And
Just-
I know that there was no physical evidence, but my Lord, there was.
There's-
Episode 238, if anyone hasn't heard it, a mountain of circumstantial evidence. to that guy.
There's enough there to continue plugging along and working that case that
But he was not convicted of it, and he died of old age in
Well-
Hot Springs, I believe.
he never went to trial, wasn't he?
Yeah. I don't think he ever even went to trial.
Yeah, I was going to say, my recollection was, I don't even think they filed a charge on him.
I don't either.
Wow.
So,
It's one of those. We have covered several cases like that where you know who it is, but by whatever means or technicalities or whatever, the person managed to skate through.
If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Well, fortunately, back in the 30s, the chief of police, the chief of detectives, and the Bureau of Identification Investigation supervisor, all three went to federal prison for harboring Alvin Karpus.
Really?
And that was Joe Wakeland was the chief of police. Herbert Dutch Akers was the chief of detectives. And I can't remember Brock is the other guy's last name, but all three of those were they were money. When Charles Lucky Luciano, the New York gangster, they were looking for him because Thomas Dewey had filed charges on prostitution and had a warrant for him, and they couldn't find him in New York. And a New York City police detective had happened to be in Hot Springs on vacation, and he was walking on the promenade, and who does he see but
Are you kidding me?
Luciano talking to the chief of detectives of Hot Springs,
Wow.
Buddy Buddy.
Wow.
And so he gets the word out, and Dewey, I believe it was Governor Futrell at the time,
right.
that demanded that Arkansas do something about it. So he loaded up a troop of these guys with machine guns and went to Hot Springs and got him out of the jail and took him and mailed him back to New York.
Wow.
He did offer, according to several sources, offer the governor $50,000 to void the extradition. So
Oh my
thank
goodness.
goodness Governor Futrell was a stand-up guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, jumping back to, this is not in Arkansas, but Skidmore and Ken McElroy, he had a lot of local enforcement either bribed or just scared. There was one particular judge that was just
Terrifying.
terrified
Yeah.
in any case that was going to be involving Ken McElroy, he would excuse himself or whatever the terminology. I don't
Recuse.
maybe recuse himself, and he would not because rumor had it that Ken said, you judge against me, I'll burn your house down and everyone in it.
I guess that wouldn't be the correct. I guess that's not the correct term, but I guess you would. What's the term where you say that you have too much personal
Like if a
stock
judge,
in a case to
I think the term you used is correct.
Oh, it is-
You would recuse from
Okay.
hearing that case for whatever the reason.
Oh,
be.
okay,
Yeah.
so it's a pretty broad.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it is correct,
But this
correctly
is
used.
a tactic that the cartels have taken and refined to the nth degree. I mean, the old saying, plata or paloma, silver or lead, and they don't stop with you. They hurt your family, your friends, your dog.
Sure,
everybody.
yeah.
It's caused some serious problems, as you well know, in Mexico and other places.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
That's that's a whole other
And they are here.
can of worms. Yeah, for sure.
Another field trip, if you haven't taken one, you need to go to Hot Springs. There's the Hot Springs Gangster Museum that's
Haven't been
down
there.
there. You haven't been there, Tony? I had to go down to Hot Springs for a conference, and I got there early enough that I thought, okay, I'm going to hit this place. And it was really kind of an interesting exhibit that talks about, some of the old gangsters that have been there throughout the city, the politicians, how they were tied together. They've got Lynn Davis, the old state police director that targeted gambling in Hot Springs. They've got some information about his tenure there. They've got roulette tables. I mean, just tons of stuff in there, and it's pretty
I've
neat.
been to Hot
little
Springs a lot, but
museum.
I haven't visited that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go down there for a conference a
Yeah.
few times. I've been there for a conference a few times.
Yep.
And Al Capone, didn't he have a
He was there.
didn't he have a bar there or something? The Ohio Club or something? I might be way off with that, but I could have swore we went
There's
to
rumors he had interest in it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
Maybe
yeah.
that was what I heard, but yeah, that was really. And when we did the Linda Edwards case to open up that episode, I did a little bit of the history of Hot Springs and mentioned all the where it was a safe haven and a hotbed for gangster activity back in the day.
And there's
Minneapolis, St. Paul was another one.
Really?
Interesting that it's still in turmoil constantly.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of tunnels, subterranean tunnels between some of those old hotels that are there.
Really?
General public doesn't know about them, but yeah, you can pass underneath the streets through some of those hotels to get from one to the
Get
other.
from speakeasy to speakeasy.
Exactly. exactly.
Creek under the roadway.
Yeah.
Really? That's in Hot Springs.
That's in Hot Springs.
That is really cool. Well, there's also in Prairie Grove. There's an interesting the spring there. It goes under the road, and there's a building on the right that years and years and years ago used to be the main office or shop, is what I mean. And you can walk in there, and it looks like just a big garage. But if you pull back this big iron or metal plate, there's water running under there. Huh. It runs under the
that's
building. Yeah, it's real. That's where the city water came from.
Oh, okay.
For a long
Wow.
time.
I didn't
Not
know
now,
that.
but yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that little park's really cool. That's a Master Gardener project. They do a great job.
Yeah, and there's pictures of ladies, back in the maybe early 1800s with their big giant Victorian dresses and their little umbrellas, sitting around the spring.
Oh, yeah,
And it's really super cool.
Awesome. Yeah.
So
Amazing.
if you want to elaborate on this, I kind of flipped through this earlier too, and this one is titled "The Day a Crime Spree Ended in Hardy, Arkansas." Do you mind elaborating on that a little bit?
Not a bit. It also involves the death of an officer and the serious wounding of another officer. Mississippi Highway Patrolman was wounded, and a young rookie for Dallas Police Department was shot and killed, or shot and mortally wounded. He lived several days. But they got away after the shooting, and nobody knew where they were or where they were headed or anything. But it just so happens that the barber in Hardy, Arkansas, was also the city marshal, and so his shop was on Main Street, which used to be the highway run right through the middle of town. And he kept attuned to what was going on. He saw a car with out-of-state plates, and he saw a couple of guys get out with shotguns and go into the hardware store. Well, it's not uncommon to see shotguns on Main Street in Hardy even today, but something about it just didn't ring true. So he got the sheriff, who was newly elected, brand new in office. There were two county seats, one at Hardy and one at Ash Flat, and they've moved strictly to Ash Flat now. But So the sheriff and the city marshal went in the hardware store and told those gentlemen that they needed to talk to him outside. And they went out to the car, and the sheriff said that they're going to have to look in their car. Well, the guy that the city marshal was talking to drew a German Luger out from under his coat, and the sheriff grabbed his arm and started grappling with him. And he fired around, and it went through the brim of the sheriff's hat.
Oh my God!
And they fell down in the street, and of course there's rocks in the Ozarks, so they were rolling around, and the sheriff found a rock, and he put it to good use. He brained the guy and stunned him, and was able to take him into custody. And meanwhile, the city marshal got the other one under control. Then somebody told them that they'd seen two other guys get out of that car earlier back up the street, and so they came out of an alleyway, and the city marshal put them on the ground at gunpoint, got them in custody. They were taken to Jonesboro for security. Found out that they were the ones that killed the Dallas police officer, and they treated those two officers the way officers ought to be treated when they do something really good like that. Is they brought them to Dallas for the Super Bowl, I think it was.
Oh, wow.
Put them up at the Adolphus, which is a really great hotel in Dallas. And, bought them new cowboy boots and cowboy hats. And best of all, they gave them each an engraved .357 Smith & Wesson
Wow.
revolver.
Dang,
Yeah.
that is
That's
cool.
a picture of one of them. But,
Yeah.
one of the marshal's sons got into reloading, and he blew it up.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
But it's
So yeah, you're right, because obviously those guys were, at the beginning of that stage of what they were doing, a reign of terror, if you will. So
like
they
this,
stopped it.
They told everybody they were a hillbilly band.
Okay.
Looking for a fiddler, by the way.
Wow.
But
Wow.
it's good that the Dallas PD carries on Johnny Sides, the officer that was killed, his memory. Because every year since then, the outstanding rookie in each recruit class has been awarded the Johnny Sides Award.
Very cool.
So
Yeah,
it's a
for sure.
black tie and tails kind of thing for high society in Dallas, and it's neat that they've got that in their mind that an officer paid with his life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So you touched on something earlier. I wanted to get y'all's. This is something that we spoke about in a previous episode, and I can't remember which case, but the fingerprint thing.
Okay.
When did that really come into its own and become a real viable tool for law enforcement? I can't remember. Basically, I think my question is, how far back, were they first utilizing fingerprints in detective cases?
I'm going to say J. Edgar Hoover is the one that first put that entire program together, at least within the United States, when he first became director of the FBI.
So we're talking 20s,
We're talking
30s?
teens. It was
Okay.
there was an agency, I forget, it might have been Bureau of Investigation.
I think that,
before.
yes, we
That's the
covered that.
forerunner.
Yeah, the
Yes.
forerunner to the FBI, Bureau of Investigation. So they were aware of the differences in fingerprint, patterns and swirls and things like that. And so he's the first one that really put that technology together, hired the examiners, and tried to get that thing going for identification purposes. And then it kind of continued on from there. In Arkansas, there was James Earl Scroggin was a fingerprint examiner for the Little Rock Police in the 20s. And when the state police was created in 1935, ASP hired Scroggin from Little Rock, and he became the fingerprint examiner, the only one in the whole state.
We've mentioned him in some episodes.
that got the state police at least involved in fingerprint identification then. But back then, you didn't have the computer technology to do it. If you dusted that glass right there and pulled a fingerprint off of it, you had a good latent print. Now, who are you going to compare it to? Don't know.
Right.
There's no database to enter that into.
You have to have
compare.
at least a pool of
You
suspects.
had to have a pool of suspects. You had to have some idea. Okay, well, maybe we need to fingerprint these 5 guys, and we will do. Those are called elimination prints. We're going to compare the unknown with the knowns.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's not Ivan. It's not Joe. It must belong to Sam because he was in here.
I agree with that. That sounds
putting
about
stuff
right.
in that drum room anyway. So,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
you really had to have a suspect print to compare it to. You're not going to get a comparison. You're not going to get an ident.
And like
That-
the case in Garden City, I mean, can you imagine how tedious it was when they sent that to D.C.? Like Steve's talking about, they had a volume of fingerprints from nationwide that they were building this database, but you had to sit there and go through each one.
Oh,
And
God.
Nope. That'd be mind-boggling.
Sure.
to sit and do
Yeah.
that.
And isn't that the case where each fingerprint was on like a clear piece of plastic or something?
It's on a card. It's on a
Yes.
fingerprint card.
And then you would just overlay each one to compare and see if they matched. Is that how it was
Well,
initially?
you could eliminate some if you knew this is a swirl type print, and these that you're on the card are all arches. Get rid of that one pretty quick. But if you hit a swirl on there, you had to start doing a little more comparison, looking for the center points and find the other 12 points of identification to try to pinpoint whether it's really the suspects or not. But it's very tedious work.
Sure.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
couldn't-
And microscopes were around then, and that's for firearms technology also, to compare bullet
Oh, yeah.
gyrations.
Click
But
comparators.
you could do that with fingerprints too. You're looking at, both cards, trying to match up all the points of identification. So
Did you say click comparators?
Yeah, I only know that. I know nothing about the ballistics thing you were talking about. That's amazing. But that's how they discovered Pluto. Claude Tombaugh. He was by day he was a janitor of the Lowell Observatory, but by night he would get some telescope time just for being a loyal employee, and he would use different views to actually click between two different views and see if there was a speck that appeared that would move. So you just get thousands of images, put two together, click, 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 back and forth.
Okay.
And he was able to use all those images to figure out that it was making the same elliptical path as the rest of the planet. So therefore it had to be a planet and not an asteroid or a meteor, because they wouldn't go in that line. So he was able to discover Pluto, I think in 1934. I think that's when that was, if I'm not mistaken. So the same technology. Yeah. Amazing.
And so someone else, I just have these, I usually can write stuff down, but I'm trying to remember now. Handwriting. Someone mentioned earlier a case that he had written letters to the governor.
Yeah, there's something about
Flegel.
the envelope, the Flegels.
Yes. How viable is that handwriting identification? I know in the Zodiac killer case, that's a big deal with, I can't remember the main suspect who a lot of people think it is, but it's, supposedly his handwriting matches. I've just noticed on myself, even though I can find something that I chicken scratched a couple years ago, and it doesn't even really look like something I'd write now, even just comparing it to myself. So what are your thoughts on that, or opinion on the validity of handwriting in detective work?
Handwriting was a tool that was really used a lot. I'm going to say probably in the 60s, for sure the 70s. Much like the 8-track tape, it peaked and then it went back down. It has fallen into disuse now as
You can
far
track
as
it with disco,
yeah,
which is-
as far as an investigative tool. I mean, it's not used as much anymore.
Okay.
Probably because there's not that much.
Yeah, no one.
People don't. You're right. People don't write much.
But there were a lot of court cases when handwriting comparisons were done, because I remember you doing handwriting comparisons on check forgeries, on credit card fraud cases, things like that. Suicide notes you'd want to compare, There was a lot of court cases that questioned the scientific methods and the validity of that technology, on whether the interpreter was interpreting the results correctly, and then slowly began to fall out of use. And around 19, and I'm going to guess at the era, but Frank Hartman, retired from Fort Smith PD, was the last, as far as I can remember, the last fingerprint or handwriting examiner that worked at the Arkansas State Crime Lab in Little Rock. And it was well on its way out. But yeah, like Sam points out today, who writes anything?
Right.
Yeah, sure.
They don't even teach cursive in school.
Yeah.
No,
anymore.
and that's
Yeah.
bizarre.
Yeah.
And when I was doing research at the Arkansas Archives in Little Rock, I was talking to the archivist there, and she said, I've got to spend a lot of time here trying to interview these people. They want to come to work in archives. They've got history degrees. They've got this kind of degree. And I said, so how difficult is it to get hired? She said, the big thing we're running into is people that we're hiring now of this age group, they don't know how to read cursive handwriting. And all of the archive documents from the 18th century, 17th century, it's all cursive. So they're not able to read that.
Well, hey, we've got a fallback. We can read cursive.
Yeah, my 17-year-old daughter,
Yeah.
she can read and write cursive. There's a conspiracy theory podcast that I listen to, and they are 100% convinced that the reason they're phasing out cursive is so that future generations will not be able to read the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all. They don't want us to know our rights, man, and that's so they can't. They'll need an interpreter to read the Constitution.
When I took my young son to the post office in Fayetteville to get his passport, one of the things you have to do is have your picture made and all that stuff, and you had to write in cursive your signature on the paperwork. And the clerk said, "I need you to write your name," and he takes the pen and she said, "No, honey, you printed it. I need you to write it." And he said, "That's the way I write it." And I leaned over and I said, "Cursive." He said, "What?" I said, "The cursive. Old style." Yeah, cursive, the old style. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Give me your
I
doctor's
can try to
signature.
remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a doctor's signature because mine is a big cursive J with a and then a big cursive H with a. That's what I.
Yeah.
You're practicing for that celebrity status.
There you go.
Yeah, when there's a bunch of Polaroid or whatever, the glossy photos there. Hey, okay, all right.
You got to write fast.
Yeah.
But I was talking to a friend of mine who's the police chief at the Greenland School District about things going on the campus.
Sure.
And he said the school had gotten rid of all the lockers. And I said, well, what about the kids and all the books they've got to carry? And he said, no. All the kids have iPads.
Yeah.
They don't carry books. They don't carry paper. Everything is typed notes. So there's no official note-taking of anything that's not in digital format.
And I got to say, I actually write a lot, and it's whenever I dive into a case, I have a big old, yellow notepad, and I might have 17 tabs open on my computer and 3 books around, and I'm always, trying to do chronological, and I literally have file cabinets full of notes from episodes and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's something that's gone away, and I don't know. It seems like a lot of that stuff.
I remember one year I was working Thanksgiving. I was the guy on call. I was sitting at the office, and you remember the old IBM Selectric typewriter?
Sure.
The tape cartridge that you took out, pulling that out and writing every strike that had been made on that ribbon, looking for that forged check that had been typed on the typewriter.
Oh, wow.
I had a pile of ribbon piled up on my desk, but I found where that particular typewriter ribbon had been used in that particular machine.
Good work.
But those skills aren't used anymore.
Yeah.
It's all digital on the computer.
Everyone's just with their thumbs or typing social media. I know we're a little bit hypocritical because I always dog social media because I think that is one of the major things. Wokeness has used social media as the perfect vehicle to, whatever people think of Elon Musk, I guess there's differing opinions.
Sure.
But he was on Rogan's podcast the other day, and he said something that made a lot of sense. He said normally, like it was in San Francisco, where this woke kind of atom bomb took off. But he was like, without social media, those things remained compartmentalized. People be like, don't go to San Francisco, those people are wacky. And it would have stayed there and either kind of got bigger or probably fizzled out. But because of social media now, that was able to kind of spread out its tentacles and infect the rest of the country and get us to where we are today through social media. I know, like you said, social media is like anything. It can be used for good or for bad.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, I felt like I was so proud of myself for not having any social media, but through the podcast now I have an Instagram and Facebook through the podcast, but I was just trying to rectify that in my mind that you're not a sellout. We're not doing anything evil. We're not arguing about stuff. We're not disseminating terrible information. We're just trying to promote something here.
Well, I have social media, but it's been years and years and years since I've gotten in any kind of political debates or any kind of debates on there because I just follow the groups of the things that I like, and they don't allow those things.
Yeah.
So like if you like a certain hobby like ham radio, like you get on ham radio. I'm into that a little bit. You can't talk about who you like for president on there, or they'll ban you from the site because they don't want to hear about it. They want you to talk about ham radio. Wow, what a novel idea. Talk about the thing you're supposed to talk about. But so that's how I've filtered it to where it works for me. But there are people that they post that thing that other people will get behind, and they'll get a few likes, and they'll think that means I'm right because 12 people liked it. Well, 80 people saw that and didn't do anything, and they just scrolled past it. They didn't agree with you, but they didn't say anything. There's not a dislike button on purpose. They tried that for a while. They did a pilot test on the dislike button, and people had each other's throats almost because of it. So they got rid of it. They can't take the dislike. They can only take the like. So what does that tell you about social media?
Right.
You know?
Hungry for approval.
Yeah.
That's right. That's it. And they've done studies on somebody will post something, and within a few minutes they'll want to look and I got 3 likes.
Oh, this is interesting. Like on YouTube comments, you'll see like maybe 3 months ago someone said this, and it has 170 likes, and then you'll see edited, and they will have gone back and said, "Oh my gosh, I've never gotten this. Thanks, guys."
Yeah.
And I'm like, thanks for what?
Yeah.
You don't know these people.
Yeah.
That's a whole. I'm going to go on a 2-hour rant about social media. It's people trying to impress people you don't know, and you'll never know. I just don't understand it, and that's another. That's another negative part of it is what you're seeing on social media. I've even looked and seen people I know, and social media is just a commercial for this fake life that a lot of people are perpetrating. Do you know what I mean?
I call it fake book all the time.
Fake book. Because, I'll see a picture of, me and my hubs, together for the end, love each other. And I'm like, no, I know you two. You're on the verge of divorce constantly. It's like, why do you do that? It's just this fake commercial.
It's the highlights, right?
It's the highlights. But,
That's the
since
lowlights.
this rise of social media, the instances of depression and even suicide, especially in young girls, has went through the stratosphere because they're now comparing themselves to this thing that's not even real. Yes. This picture of some girl doing something that, it probably didn't even happen, and she's got 20 filters on her face, and she's doing this, it's not real.
Yeah.
But they're trying to compare themselves to this. And seriously, the depression rate amongst young people, especially females, it's frightening.
Yeah.
The suicide rate as well is frightening.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to bitch about social media for a little while.
Now, I wish Elon would go back and change it back from X to Twitter
What is
and
that?
leave it alone.
What is that?
Yeah.
Because every news article now posted on X, formerly known as Twitter,
Yeah.
it just
Oh, yeah.
adds extra words to the article that I have to read now.
Yeah.
Still do away with daylight savings too.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, can we do another rant? Oh my gosh! No, I'll gripe about that any chance I get. It's so
See,
depressing.
at least you get to have a nice sunset with lunch.
Good one, Steve.
Well, hey, don't forget there are a few people that somehow think that government controls the amount of sunlight there is in any given day. So there is a small camp of that. So it is tough. I mean, to get home and in 10 minutes it's dark.
To drive to work, when it's dark and as it's getting light, and then to drive home as it's light and getting dark.
Yeah.
Because I'm an outside person. I've got to get out. I'm hardly ever inside, and it is so depressing to be dark when you get home.
It is. But after Christmas, we'll get a minute every day, right? It's after
minute every day?
Yeah, a minute every day. Yeah, and then
Good happens after dark.
that's true.
That's true.
We better just stay inside.
Crime rates quadruple or they go through the roof after dark. Obviously, I mean that's of course.
And with the holidays coming up, you'll see your suicide rates go up too.
Yeah. So, what is that? What is the correlation with that? I really.
Peer pressure of somebody being happy and you not.
That goes back to social media then. Exactly. The same deal.
Look at the pictures. Oh, they got a Christmas tree and the whole family's there.
Loneliness.
Yeah.
Loneliness is it.
I've
Yeah.
always just wondered, like, you're in a routine, you're going to work every day, and then you have some time off, but then it's just you, or you have some time off and you're not happy at your, so it's just.
Kids you may be divorced. Your kids may be with the other spouse
Sure.
this year.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
This year they're not with you, and the darker season again. So you're just inside the house and alone, and
And
loneliness
little do they
kicks
know,
in.
most of those beautiful family portraits in front of the tree, like it was probably chaos before that, where the mom was like, "Gather up here, you little shits, come on!" And then as soon as it's done, okay, they go back to fighting again. But they got that perfect. Yeah, that
And
looks so
hey,
beautiful.
every time we mention the suicide thing, I do like to talk about the suicide hotline because I've read some things about they are pretty good at what they do. They are very good at what they do. So you should at least give them a shot. If you're out there listening and you ever get to that point, take 10 more minutes.
Yeah.
And talk to them. Maybe it won't do anything, but maybe it might. There's a reason you should be on this planet because you're here. So just call someone and find out what that reason is.
Great addition to that. Make that call. Talk to somebody. Sad to bring this up, but this is today, as a matter of fact. 12 years ago today, a friend of mine that worked for the state police committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
So it is. I think about him every day because he's one of the groomsmen at my wedding, and I miss the guy like crazy. But make that phone call.
Sure.
Talk to somebody.
Sure. Someone who you got it in your brain who you should call. I mean, maybe the hotline, maybe dad, maybe mom, maybe best friend, whatever. Yeah.
We can all make a significant contribution to everyday life just by smiling at people and saying hi. Or,
Absolutely.
"How you doing?"
agree.
That goes back to your community again.
Get out of this dump, and sure we got problems ourselves, but you be kind to people. That's what we're supposed to be doing anyway.
I want to bring up the story. I just remembered it, and thank you for bringing that up because that's so important. I had a college professor in my speech class that told this story that sometimes I forget it, but it always like hits me again. So she was talking about how she was walking around campus, and she didn't realize that the expression that she gave off to just the random public was an expression of she's not doing well, right? She just gave some body language, just like a face, a look. So she actually had somebody stop her at some point.
My wife calls that resting bitch face.
Yeah. I was going to say that.
Sorry, I stole your
it's
thunder.
good. I'm glad you did. I'm
Sam said
glad
it
you
first.
did. Yeah. So she said somebody actually was concerned enough about her that was a stranger that asked her if she was doing okay, and she said yes. And then they asked again. They were like persistent. Are you sure? Are you sure? So she said she went home that night and just broke down crying that she would ever give off that impression. So then she was like, I've made a conscious effort not to be that person, to change, to smile, even if I don't really feel like it. Having a bad day, you could still, I don't want to say fake it, but you know what I mean, right? She just, for that particular time in her class, we just had a conversation. It was just like a free flow. Everyone brought up stuff. We had students in my class kind of crying, talking about little personal experiences. Just it all stemmed from that story she told. So you're totally right. Yeah, just to smile and spread that happiness.
Ivan, the guy we talked about a while ago, worked with Steve, and it was my good friend Jerry Digman when we were both working at Springdale PD. Jerry had a serious countenance all the time, and Ivan is so right. I mean, the most of your message to a person doesn't come from your words. It comes from tonal inflection, body language, space, facial expressions, just all those things that combine to make a true expression.
Yeah.
And Jerry, you remember Jerry? He kind of looked kind of grumpy at times.
Oh yeah.
And he got complaints out the wazoo, and the chief called him in, chewed him out. Tommy Goodwin. And he told Jerry, you can't treat people like this. Chief, I don't treat them bad, And it went on, and finally he called him in one day. He says, all right, I'm taking you out of your car. You're going to ride with Tony for a week. Oh, that was the worst thing you could have done. And he fussed and he fussed and he fussed. But he rode with me for a week, and he got back out in his own car. First night he got a complaint. And Chief said, call him in. He said, I don't know why, Chief. I said the same things Tony said. And he said, well, maybe it's because you're looking like us.
That's awesome. Yeah.
You can talk anybody you stop into a fight.
Oh yeah.
True.
And
Some
you
people
can
are
talk
looking for it.
Anybody you stop into jail. You can talk them into handcuffs. You can talk them into the back seat of your car. It's up to you. If you want to lose some teeth or something, you know, scuffle around a while, you better learn how to communicate with people. It is a lifesaver.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, and going back to the suicide thing, we need to get rid of the stigma, and I think it's mainly on the part of men that, you know, you're weak if you ask for help or something, or if you need that, or you know, I told the story. I'm not going to get into it, but the only reason I'm sitting here is because of my stepfather. You know, you said there's that one person that, you know, and I didn't call him, but it was just 7 years ago. It was a bad situation. No one could get a hold of me because I'd kind of taken off, and I had certain plans, and my stepfather rolled up and just kind of jerked me out of it. And, you know, there is that, I think everybody more than likely has that one person that could, you know, that could kind of snap them back into a certain frame of mind, a better frame of mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I could almost see that conversation. Joe, what the hell are you thinking? Just have to know the guy.
He rolled up and he grabbed my arm and he said, "Are you hungry?"
Oh, yeah, that's even
and
better.
being in the frame of mind, I was like, "What the hell did you just ask me?" You know, because you're just kind of out of your
Sure.
mind. Are you hungry? Let's go get something to eat. So he took me to a restaurant and we got something. We sat in there and got something to eat and we just talked, you know, for about 2 hours. I mean, he knew there was no better way. There was no like, "What are you doing?" or anything. It was just, "Are you hungry?" Just such a simple, down to earth question to just completely snap someone back into.
Breaking bread will do that.
Yeah.
It just results in conversation. And not to get religious here, but we're all made to be in relationship with other people. Yes. So if you're feeling lonely, reach out to somebody.
Exactly.
Reach out to somebody.
We are a communal species. I mean, I mean, you can't truly survive by yourself, even if you move out in the middle of the woods and grow a giant beard like Sam's. You're going to eventually take some of the things back to town and trade it for other things because you can't make everything you need to survive. So, I mean, you just got to face it. We're communal. So,
well, there's a quote.
Great point.
It was attributed to Elvis Presley. I don't know if he said it. If he did, he was a brilliant man. I love this quote, and I've said it on here before. But the three main things in life that will make you happy is something to do, something to look forward to, and someone to love. That's one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah.
And it's true.
That's good.
Yeah, it is.
Keep busy, do something, be productive, and, you know, have something to look forward to, and really importantly, have someone to love.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to find somebody.
That's right. In the words of Queen.
Yeah,
Can
there we
anybody
go.
find me?
That was a great movie. Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Lord.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
it.
That
yeah.
guy did such a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
Oh, my
yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
Have you
Well,
seen Flowers of the Killer Moon yet?
Not yet, but go ahead, Joe. We did an episode
About
that.
5 years ago, we did a 2 or 3 part.
What was your opinion of that film?
I loved it, even though I hate Robert De Niro.
Okay.
Is there a story behind why you hate Robert De Niro?
He's just so negative about everything.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think he's got his persona of being a tough gangster guy, really mixed up with who he really is. Okay. But his first acting gig ever was in Yellville, Arkansas.
Whoa.
In a film, and you hadn't seen it, you got to watch it. It's a blockbuster. Bloody Mama.
Bloody Mama.
The story of the Barker gang.
Okay.
Oh, my.
I had it in my notes about the Barker gang.
So that had to be back in the 70s, probably. If it was
right at 70, 69, 70,
Okay.
somewhere around there.
Okay.
Well, here's what I want to do if it's okay with you. I would love to have you back, and I would love to make a whole episode about the Barker gang.
For sure.
Because I read the story on the Revolver Guy, but
So many unanswered questions.
exactly, yeah. So I was gonna purposely say that we should save that for another episode because and if Steve, if you'd like to be back for that as well, that
I'd
would
be
be
happy to come back.
have the
Speaking of
dynamic
trying
duo.
to find out some of those answers, the one with the sheriff, his brother-in-law brought the Barker gang there because he's part of the Barker gang, but he was sheriff of Fulton County. So.
Okay, a little head scratcher, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to do that. Joe, do you know much about that case?
Yeah, I've just read a little bit about it. I've never done a deep dive on Ma Barker and the gang, but that would be, Belle Starr is another one we could do. But she wasn't. She was more Texas, wasn't she?
No, she's
Indian
Fort Smith,
territory.
Indian territory,
Oh,
right
really?
across. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, there you go.
She was had the eye of many deputy U.S. Marshals out of Fort Smith
Really?
because she was a notorious person over there.
And to go back to Hollywood for a minute, like True Grit, the novel, the old movie John Wayne, and then the new movie. What are your your guys' opinions about of those adaptations? I mean, I know it's not a true story, but it's...
I've not read the novel.
Okay.
I personally liked the older John Wayne version more than I did the newer version of
True,
the movie.
yeah.
But it was interesting.
Yeah.
And if you're
Steve, I liked the older one better, but the other one seemed more realistic in sets and in accoutrements and props and things like that. You know?
I've read some of the book, and I think the new movie's closer to the book, but it's hard not to love the John Wayne version.
Yeah.
When I was a kid,
yeah.
I loved that version. It was
I saw
amazing.
on the news where they're fixing up the Matty Ross homestead
Okay.
somewhere. I don't remember where that was. Somewhere
okay.
around Telluride, Colorado. I think.
Oh, okay.
And they're fixing it up to be a tourist attraction.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Cool.
But when you
yeah.
do go to Fort Smith to the Marshals Museum, plan on staying all day. And if you don't and you still have extra time, go to Judge Parker's museum. They've done some great work over there refurbishing it. It's gorgeous. They've done a good job there too.
I love that whole era of the town that had law out in to the west. There was none. You know, it's like the contrast of that whole thing. I hope I'm describing it. It's so interesting that town right on the border, if you will.
Right.
They did have law, Indian law.
Oh,
which
okay,
was
okay.
so weird. You know, they had courts. You know, they had marshals. They had their policemen. They called them light horse.
Okay.
Light horse.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. But they couldn't arrest a white.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was referring to. The fact that the white men would go over and use it as like an asylum to be lawless or whatever.
And not to detract, but there's a book that I bought at the museum, the U.S. Marshals Museum, on Bass Reeves. Pretty decent biography on Bass.
Okay.
I've read it. Joe, I'll give it to you if you want to take a look at it.
Yeah, you sent me an article about it.
Yeah.
But as a result of reading that, just finishing it up, is it Paramount or is it Prime that just released Prime that just released Bass Reeves?
Oh, okay.
So check out Prime
Okay,
online.
I will.
You'll find there were 2 episodes I think released on Bass Reeves.
Excellent.
And it's really gotten off to a pretty good start.
Okay.
So take a look at that.
There's my evening. There we go.
He was a former slave in the Confederacy. Lived in Van Buren, became a deputy U.S. Marshal.
Is that who I sent you?
Is that what you said?
No, yeah, Sam sent that.
Ended up retiring from that and was one of the first black officers that worked in Muskogee up until the date of his death, and he's buried over in Muskogee, Oklahoma.
Yeah, we need to do a whole episode on that.
Yeah.
I just
Sam sent
2
me.
years
Yeah.
ago, I was running sound for a band up at the casino, and one of the guys, like, we were talking, about the podcast, and one of the guys in the band was like, "Have you ever heard of Bass Reeves?" And I looked him up and I sent it to Joe, and I was like, "You heard of this dude?" And so
I said no, but we're doing an article on him
so,
or an episode.
That's crazy. So now
There's even more reason to go to Fort Smith.
Yeah, for
The guy
sure.
that wrote that biography is a friend of mine. He's a retired college professor from Chicago.
Yeah.
And Art Burton.
Yeah.
He's a very talented guy. And there's an equestrian statue on Garrison Avenue at the end of the bridge of Bass Reeves. The only equestrian statue in Arkansas.
Really?
Scratch your head and think, yeah, they're everywhere. We finally got one.
Wow, yeah.
But, Bass Reeves, I get mixed emotions about it because he was, according to all accounts I read and talking to Art Burton, the author of the book that studied him more than anybody alive, he was a good officer, but he also had, like Steve said, human, and humans make mistakes. We sin. All of us are sinners at some time or another. And he was tried for murder, for killing his cook that threw hot grease or something on his dog. And I think all of us love dogs so much. We'd probably
That's justified. Yeah, he's free to go.
But it thrills my heart to no end any time an officer is honored and pushed, elevated to the thanks for the kind of service that they do. But also it makes the taste of it a little raw when sometimes a guy is artificially pushed, I mean, beyond his level of ability and accomplishments simply for cultural reasons.
Okay.
Given the fact that, yes, all people need heroes to look up to, and that's what's wrong in America sometimes. There's not enough heroes.
Right. Oh, that's a good quote.
We
yeah.
had heroes.
Yeah.
Gosh, I couldn't count them all. That were
Yeah.
my heroes. And they helped shape my life as much or more than my parents. But sometimes, they tried to sell this story that Bass Reeves was the original Lone Ranger. There wasn't a Lone Ranger. It's a figment of somebody's imagination.
Yeah. The Hollywood. Yeah.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
But great that he's being recognized and honored, but do it for the right reasons.
Sure.
Not for
Yeah.
the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
I got a call when Dick O'Connell was U.S. Marshal. He said, "Can you meet me in Fort Smith at 5 o'clock in the morning?" I said, "Dick, what do you want me to do?" And he said, "Just be here." I said, "Okay." So I fired up 3 o'clock in the morning and headed for Fort Smith from Little Rock and meet him. And he said, "Get in the car." And I locked up my unit and jumped in the car with him. We crossed the border. I said, "Where are we going?" And he said, "Muskogee." I said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "We're going to go to a graveyard." We met the U.S. Marshal for the Eastern District of Oklahoma and 2 of his deputies, and the U.S. Marshal's historian, Dave Turk out of Washington, came, and another friend of his came that's a historian, and we were searching for Bass Reeves' grave.
Oh, wow.
If you've ever been to Muskogee and go through town on the business route, and then when you clear town up by Honor Heights and by the where the old castle was, where they had the medieval thing.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
Right
I know what
hand
you're
side
talking
of the road, there's a big expanse of brushy, wooded area. And when you walk through that brush, you'll be amazed. There's hundreds of graves back there. Hundreds.
I've driven by that place a dozen times.
I have too, Joe. I mean, I used to go to Muskogee all the time looking for badges and stuff, but I couldn't believe it. And these were not, cross on a stick, These were very nice, expensive graves for the time period. And some of them were just crumbling. There was one, I could actually see bones,
Wow.
through the crypt or, the above ground crypt.
Yeah.
And it's just a mess. And we looked all day, but there's probably more rattlesnakes than there are graves in there. But, we didn't find any solid evidence that he was there. Well, since then, Art has told me he has found out where he's buried. And it's not far from where we were at, but it's west of the business route on the road that goes north of the city park where they had the Magnolia Festival.
Okay, yeah.
And you go out there a little ways, and there's a country church out there, and he's buried in that churchyard. And I don't think his grave is marked. But
Oh, okay.
Art has found an older gentleman that it's been handed down. He's part of that community, and
Okay.
that's where he is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's
It
amazing.
was interesting to me to read that biography on him. And for all the years that he worked for the Marshal Service, serving writs, he could not read.
Whoa.
Really?
And had
Yeah.
to arrest his own son for
Yeah,
murder.
for murder.
Oh,
Whoa.
my gosh.
Wow.
Interesting
Yeah,
character.
that would be
Yeah.
an interesting story.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm thinking about Fort Smith now, I can't wait to get down there because there's several cases we can go to. We can see the museums. We can go to the Melissa Witt sites. We can jump right over to Alma, and we can go to the ball field. Let me tell you, since I've been looking at those files for Morgan Nick, I have really combed over Google Earth and Google Maps, looking at that ball field and trying to, get the topography right and where this guy was parked and the sand pile. Where's this infamous sand pile that they were in?
Now, keep in mind, the ball field where they are today is not where they were in 1995 when that case started.
Okay, so it's
The
not
ball
right.
the ball fields are across the street.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's there now? Is it just empty or?
I think it may be empty lot right now.
Okay,
But
okay.
I can look on today's map. And
Sure.
I might even still have access to an older map and kind of show you where the difference is.
I do know on Google Earth you can actually roll back. You can there's a slider at the top. It's a crazy feature. It's almost hidden unless you know it's there, but you can actually pull a slider and go back to some of the first aerial images.
Okay,
And they're terrible, huh?
Yeah, they're terrible. But if you're zoomed out enough, you can at least kind of see where things were. It's not until about 2002 before they get where you can see pretty well. And that's all. A friend of mine told me that was all about lenses. They started using better lenses. Was that aerial photography, and the clarity became better. And also digital photography was getting better at that point. So yeah, amazing.
Don't forget when you go down there to go across the bridge on 64, the old Highway 64 bridge.
Okay.
And right before you get on the bridge, to the right there, nothing's left anymore. But that was the Dennis Tourist Court where Bonnie and Clyde stayed.
Okay.
During that whole time.
We're going to have to listen to this episode and just take a bunch of notes because we've got so many Fort Smith things. We should get a VRBO for like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
While you're at the Marshals Museum, you're in the Hall of Honor, and they have a plaque with each deputy's name or marshal's name that was killed in line of duty. And you'll be looking through there, and you'll find one that says Frank Dalton. Does that name sound familiar?
That does sound familiar.
He was the older brother of the Dalton gang.
Oh, wow.
He was a deputy U.S. Marshal under Judge Parker. Good marshal, according to the accounts I've read. He was trying to bust up a alcohol importing bunch across the river into Indian Territory, almost crossed the river from the museum. So if you're looking at his name, you turn and look across the river, that's probably where he was killed.
Wow.
His brother, Bob, joined the Marshal Service to replace him, and the other two brothers served as posse men where they were paid for assisting the marshal. But it's another one of those you wouldn't believe it stories because, there's so many changes.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So really quick, you want to end with this?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had any interest in it, but Steve turned me on to the Phantom Marine case. That's kind of been stuck in the back of my.
Not real familiar with it.
Okay, well, we have an episode about it that, thanks to him, he gave me a bunch of good files and stuff on it, and it's a really interesting case about a veteran supposedly showed back up in Newport, Arkansas, and was supposedly this gentleman who'd been killed, and it's wild. I can't remember what was our take on that at the end of the episode. Was that really him or not? Do you have any opinion on that, Steve? I think my opinion was it was not him. It was an imposter, and that he really did die at Iwo Jima.
thinking it was probably an imposter as well.
Okay. Yeah. Go back and listen to that episode, people, to know what we're talking about.
If it seems too good to be true, a lot of times it ends up not being true, right?
And what led, at least in my view, what led to a lot of the confusion was the haphazard recording that all of the forensic team did when they were recording the injuries to the body, and then the exhumation, moving the body from grave here to grave there, and it just led to a lot more questions.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
They didn't do a very good job with identification.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a book out by a noted author. You ever heard of Brooks Blevins?
Oh, I love Brooks Blevins.
Have you read his?
Professor of in Missouri,
Southwest Missouri State.
Ozark Studies.
Yeah. He's a great guy. He grew up in north central Arkansas.
Okay.
too.
Okay.
And he has written a book about a case in Stone County where this guy was supposedly killed and burned, his body burned. And they arrested these guys and were fixing to try him, and the guy shows up. So y'all might like to read that one.
Wow.
I actually think I was talking about that case to you when you were here last, Steve, or not last, but remember that was that the case where in court they had the guy play the banjo?
The guy's name was Connie Franklin.
Yeah,
think.
something
And
like
I
that.
can't remember the title of the book, but I don't remember the banjo thing. There was something.
Something odd to where I think it was either a banjo or a mandolin or something where if you are him, he was a great banjo player, and in court I'm not remembering correctly, I don't think, but it was something
so long
odd in the case where he had to, do something, and they were like, oh, and then, but that act itself split the crowd as well. They were like, "That's just how he plays," and the other people were like, "Oh, it wasn't as good as he can play, so it wasn't."
That's
so
what people just seeing.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
believing whatever they want to believe.
That's so. I mean, I wouldn't think that would be like something that would in a movie. They'd be like, "We know that was him now,"
It's
but
funny.
that's not the way real life works.
The way people view things, if it's someone you like.
Yeah,
they
it's
run
an
in and
echo chamber,
right? Where they could run into a burning orphanage and save all the kids. Oh, he's a hero. But if you don't like the guy, you're like, oh, he went in there and touched children without their, without their permission.
Yeah,
He's probably the one that set fire to it.
Yeah,
just so he could do that.
Yeah.
So
he did it so he could become famous.
However
right.
you want to
Yeah.
view it.
Yeah.
That shapes how people see things.
Yeah, it really does. Well, hey, thank you guys one more time for coming all this way and coming to the studio. It's amazing. Anytime you guys want to come back, there's always an open place for you here.
Thank you for having us.
It's an honor
Enjoy
to
it.
be here with you guys, and my wife was right. You're going to have more fun than a barrel of monkeys.
We try to have fun. We try not to be stuffed shirts and too serious.
Thank you guys
We
for what you're doing. It's providing a very popular form of entertainment.
well, just like that. Just to show people the open conversation, like. Just be civil and have a conversation with people. That's what would bridge so many gaps and help the country more than anything. Just instead of that thing where I hate that person, I'm going to walk away from and not talk. Just like, let's talk to everyone. Let's assume the best in everyone and have open conversations. That's what we need more than anything.
Remember one quote to another quote. Political correctness is like a drug we keep injecting ourselves with, even though we know it's going to kill us.
That's true.
Yep. And
Yeah.
that's tied with wokeism and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Totally.
This is something I'll end with this. I wanted to say this at the outset, but it slipped my mind. But I just wanted to say I feel super fortunate to have all of you in here. It's just crazy because this whole thing started 6 years ago with me calling him and saying we should start a podcast. And so our very first one was in his garage, and he was raising baby chickens, and they were chirping too much, so we had to scrap that one. And then we were upstairs in a bedroom of mine, but my daughter had a parrot that was in there going, "Want some water?" So then we converted a shed out in my backyard into a studio where we bolted microphones hanging down from the ceiling, and we were in there, and my Pomeranian would come in.
A shed that we put the roof on.
Yeah, we built that shed from the ground up.
Yeah.
And it's just evolved so much, and I'm so thankful. I know, Mr. Perrin, you drove 3 hours to get here.
Mr. Perrin and Tony did.
Tony did.
Who's Mr. Perry?
And I mean, that's a huge deal to me that you did that, and super fortunate to have you here, Mr. Coppinger. Like when we started out,
Steve.
and I know they don't like that. When the chickens were chirping, if someone would have told me a few years later that we'd have these gentlemen in and we'd be in a studio, which leads me to Sam. Sam was up last night till 2 or 3 in the morning running sound for our band. He come home, he slept 3 hours, got back up, got everything ready for this episode. We couldn't do this without Sam. We wouldn't do it without him. I feel so fortunate, man, that that you're huge to this. You're the producer. This is all Sam. We're almost inconsequential.
It is.
This is all Sam, and I really appreciate you, man. Ivan, I appreciate you because I know you're a busy guy, and you drive an hour round trip every week, and you take time away from your family and all your studies and everything to come do this.
Feels like Thanksgiving's coming up.
It does, man. I was just this morning when I got up and I always look forward to the podcast. It's my favorite day of the week, and I was just flooded with gratitude.
Well, I will say this.
Is so great.
Steve gave you that huge file about Morgan Dick.
Yes.
And I was like, I can't wait till Joe goes through that entire file so we can do a bunch of episodes.